Agents essentially are the new websites. When we talk about like WordPress, for example, what WordPress did was it made like anyone able to create like a pretty clean website. Where's like the WordPress for agents coming up where we're seeing all these like launch pads and app stores where there's just going to be an agent that will fulfill a request for you. Let's say all I do is swap, right? I'm just like buying, selling coins. Instead of having to find like the best aggregator to do this, I might just go to an app store for agents, and there's going to be an agent that just like, okay, it's always going to find the best execution for me.
I wanted to jump in on your X article. You've been writing more, and I personally am just now. I mean, I'm late to it. It feels like late in crypto, early for everyone else. But just getting into the whole like crypto XAI agent thing, I was familiar with it from like a decentralized compute standpoint, like a deepened standpoint. But agents have just taken over everything. It feels like, and it also does feel like we're on the cusp of something pretty extraordinary. And so we can talk later about how that kind of plays into deepen. But a couple of things that jumped out at me from your article were just like, and an idea I've heard elsewhere as well is AI powering the UI for crypto. So crypto wallets, crypto blockchains, explorers are all kind of like not very human readable, and AI and AI bots and chatbots can kind of power the front end for interacting with crypto. So maybe talk a bit about that and what you're seeing on that like kind of front.
Yeah, I would say like it's not even something that's unique to crypto. I think in general over the past, couple of decades in tech, like Web 2 interfaces, we're all used to interacting through these like graphical user interfaces where like the whole point when you're a user interacting is like you need to learn yourself, how do I operate with this? And that's created this set of design standards where, here are like the best practices where a user knows these icons and they've kind of like memorized in their head, like, oh, this drop down means XYZ. But it's all this process of like learning and interpreting and like kind of trying to teach the user so that they can understand how to operate. And the next step we've seen with agents is now you can directly, through your intent, just communicate what you want instead of having to figure out. And it just makes so much sense for crypto that this is the way that our user experience evolves. I think we're seeing this with like these DeFi terminals. That's kind of the first place we're seeing it, where crypto UX inherently sucks. Obviously, it's gotten better over the past 3 years, but it's inherently unfriendly. There's the cost of mistake is so high, and it's really made for machines to interact. So I think there is a thesis coming that the way the next generation of onboarding people into crypto is going to happen is via these complete like terminals that are user intent based. Not to say we won't have like really clean UI and like existing interfaces. I think like the apps you like and love will still exist, but they'll probably integrate some sort of intent into their platform as well. So like, you go into your favorite aggregator and over the next couple of years, that'll all shift to being intent driven.
100%. In terms of like natural language communicating with an AI bot,
Exactly.
to like
Yeah,
telegraph what you want to do versus having to like click around
exactly.
on the UI and figure it out yourself.
Yeah, and like you're figuring it out and then you feel frustrated because you're like, why is this so difficult to use? That friction just shouldn't exist altogether. And I think like that's how I think like agents essentially are the new websites. So instead like, and I think, when we talk about like WordPress, for example, what WordPress did was it made like anyone able to create like a pretty clean website. I think the next iteration we see both in, crypto and outside of it is where's like the WordPress for agents coming up where we're seeing all these like launch pads and app stores where there's just going to be an agent that will fulfill a request for you. So like, let's say all I do is interact with like, a Uniswap type of like, all I do is swap, right? I'm just like buying, selling coins. Instead of having to find like the best aggregator to do this, I might just go to an app store for agents, and there's going to be an agent that just like, okay, it's always going to find the best execution for me. So like the next iteration of a website might not even be like, a Jupyter of the world, but like I'm going to an agent specific app store, and then that'll fulfill my task for me.
Makes a ton of sense, and I'm excited to see that feature come out. So yeah, if you guys haven't checked it out, check out Evan's Twitter article about the, I think like 5 or 6 categories of kind of projects or crypto projects that are operating in this new upstart crypto agent space. The the other thing I wanted to touch on is you tweeted something about a parallel execution environment being important for the development of agents and specifically multi-agent kind of frameworks or protocols. So talk to me a little bit about that and why you think that's important.
100%. I think it has to both do with the scale of agents transacting on the blockchains and the way these actually work in terms of multi-agent systems. So I think the one thing in terms of scale, like in the end of that article, the take I wrote was it's more likely we'll see a billion agents on chain than a billion humans on chain. And again, right, it kind of makes sense that these interfaces make more sense for agents. And what we'll see is these multi-agent systems, like people are calling it swarms. So we'll see like swarms of agents that'll act on a user's behalf. So instead of like having to onboard 5 new users into crypto, maybe now you or I in in like a couple years time, we're gonna have our own personalized swarms. Like you're gonna have a Connor swarm that's going to be like 10 agents doing all of your day-to-day on-chain or even off-chain tasks for you. And I think that's how like crypto transactions scale. But when you think about that, the amount of throughput needed and the amount of actions taken on the blockchain are going to be far more than what we currently have now. So I think that's where parallel execution starts to come in. And because when you look at how these agents are designed with these multi-agent systems, they're all in like very recursive feedback loops. Like if you have a Connor swarm, you might be operating like 10 different strategies concurrently. And maybe if you're, a person, like humans are used to sequentially transacting, like I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that. But if you're going to have like these agent swarms, they might be executing like 100 things in parallel. And then maybe all these transactions have ripple effects on each other. So I think in order to take advantage of what these multi-agent systems are good for and like the way that they operate, it makes sense to do it on a parallel execution environment.
100%. Yeah, that makes sense. And then let's talk about Monad, obviously. So
Yeah, let's do
this is
it.
something new we're trying on building in public, where we interview a couple different team members or foundation members from different protocols. We'll obviously talk to a lot of dApps and founders there, but there's also a lot of infrastructure that gets used to enable all these these deepins and these other projects to work. So you can do both or just one, but I definitely want to hear kind of Monad in your own words, right? There's obviously like the taglines and the phrases that people have heard on Twitter and the website, but like, what does it mean to you to work there? Like, what are you guys trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the more simplified version that I think about Monad with is it's about giving people the best of both worlds between having performance and then having compatibility. What I mean by that is, a lot of these blockchain systems make different trade-offs both for users and developers. I think Monad is about making sure that we have really high performance while making sure we cater to the existing set of tools, the existing set of users, the existing set of data, for example. So like obviously, the definition of what we're building at Monad is like a high performance Ethereum based or EVM based layer 1 that's 100% by code level compatible with the EVM. But what that really means for users and developers is you'll get really high performant speed and scale, but you'll also get it in an environment that you're used to. So like, why is the EVM important for us? Is because this is where a lot of the tooling is. It's a lot of where the academic research is. And even in the context of AI now, the most important thing for a lot of these models is data richness. And the EVM has this as opposed to some other new VMs and new ecosystems. So for us, that's the important thing. Like we shouldn't have to trade off all these things. We should get it in one place. So for me, Monad is the home for both performance and compatibility.
100%. And yeah, you had a tweet. I think it was your tweet. It was like, Monad is less friction for devs, less friction for users. And Solana's more friction for devs, being Rust based potentially, but less for users. And then Ethereum is kind of the opposite. So less friction for devs, more friction for users in terms of gas costs and complexity and everything else. So how specifically would you say you guys enable that kind of Goldilocks situation of less friction for devs and users?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly like why the EVM is important to Monad. I guess the analogy I've heard used before is kind of how JavaScript was as a language, where originally when JavaScript was created, it kind of sucked and and people didn't like it, but it was still being adopted as the primary standard. And so many companies try to come in and basically like, we're going to create a JavaScript killer. We're going to create something that does something similar but replaces it altogether. But the developers were still used to using it. And instead of replacing it entirely, we basically put a bunch of resources into it and made it better. And I think that's what we're seeing with the EVM. Obviously, there's developers right now who are used to using it. But besides that, a lot of the tooling to just come in and build on the EVM exists. And a lot of the new users coming in, it's easiest for them to develop using the EVM. So we think that this is a dominant standard. It's already sticky in so many ways, and we shouldn't have to fight the trend just for the sake of fighting the trend when we can have the best of both worlds. So for us, that's where with Monad, for example, one of the things that Solana introduced was parallel execution. And James and Keone, who are the founders of Monad, come from high frequency trading background at Jump, where basically their whole career was in building extremely highly performant systems. And the way I see Monad is we took a big group of like very smart people who basically have subject matter expertise in optimizing very specific things. And you kind of put that all together. So, optimizing on the execution level, optimizing within consensus, optimizing within database. So if we create these performance upgrades basically across the entire stack, that's how I see Monad enabling the system versus with other chains out there. Maybe there's one breakthrough or a few breakthroughs that really change the game. The way I think about Monad is, okay, let's think from first principles. Let's strip down everything that makes a blockchain or creates bottlenecks in a blockchain's performance. And within each and every one of these questions, how can we optimize and how can we scale it? And I think it's very laborious, painstaking pursuit to get that done. But that's been the journey here.
100%. And you work in an ecosystem at Monad. What would you say you've learned about crypto and ecosystem building since you joined? And that was about what, a year ago?
Yeah, it's been a little bit more than half a year now. Yeah, I think the things I think about most with ecosystem, I think the hardest challenge, like what keeps me up at night kind of thing is how do you balance like doing your core thing versus this idea of like skating to the puck in crypto? I think that's always what people are obsessed with, right? Like crypto moves so quickly. The joke is 1 year in crypto is like a year in any other industry. And even like with AI right now, it's something I'm sure all of us are feeling like, oh, like all of a sudden we all had to become AI agent
That's what it feels like.
when like a month ago. Yeah, exactly, right? So that's the main question I think for an ecosystem is, what is the right way to build it and scale it? I think what I really respect about Monad's approach and what I've learned is it's not up to us in many ways to define what that looks like for builders. I think everyone will take a different approach and like all of these are really solid approaches. But I think the Monad approach is the people that are building these killer apps and ideas, they're out there, they're innovators. What we can do is limit the friction for them to just come on and build. But the way I think about this, like maybe 2 years ago, if you told me that Solana was going to come out and scale with users because Pump Fund comes out, and there's this whole like meta with like trading meme coins, everything's like ICOing through a Pump Fund launchpad, I probably would have like no clue what that meant or not really believed you. I think in many ways, like that killer use case could be a year or two or 5-10 years out. But it's up to us to limit the friction so that those people can come in and build it. So it's taking kind of in some ways like a very incredibly neutral approach and just letting the innovators come and build.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not all up to the core team, right? When you have lots of other parties and developers coming into the ecosystem, they're all going to have their own personalities and desires, and you also never know which applications are going to completely pop off and
exactly
become very widely used.
Exactly. And even if a team comes in, they're building for a year, and then they decide to pivot, and all of a sudden like the pivot just completely works out for them. I think there's so many teams in DeFi where last cycle they're building something completely different or adjacent, and then now like with different metas, like Pendle's a great example of a team that was super successful this year, and in some ways like had a slight pivot from what they used to be building. Or even a team like Virtuals, I think they were building within the gaming and like metaverse space before this, and then kind of learned through that, like, okay, agents are interesting. They've been building agents within the realm of the metaverse, but then decided to go through this route with a launchpad. So you kind of have no idea like what's going to be successful, but you literally just need to let teams cook here.
100%. Yeah. And you spent some time earlier on in your career at Ava Labs which is affiliated with Avalanche. So talk to me a bit about that experience and, being at a blockchain, a layer one in the early days, and how that compares to now being at Monad, pre mainnet launch here.
Yeah, 100%. I experienced a little bit of pre-mainnet at Avalanche, and then did a little bit of BD, and then mainly on the venture side. So they had a fund called Blizzard Fund, which is an ecosystem arm for Avalanche, that's seeded by like the foundation and some other outside LPs. And then here, obviously, not doing venture investment, but on the ecosystem side, which I would say is like more similar to what BD looks like at other ecosystems. Yeah, I'd say that one of the biggest things are just the environment is completely different. When I was first at Avalanche was in 2019, and the markets were entirely different. It was kind of like building through like a very brutal bear market back then. It was post ICO bubble. Then like the only relevant names I can really still think of are like XRP is still around, right?
Yeah,
Like, and it's funny because XRP was still XRP back then. But besides that, like the application layer of blockchain did not exist in the same way we see it now. Like DeFi summer, like this is like before like Urine and Compound and like DeFi summer and NFTs and everything. I think the difference being at Monad now, like obviously we're pre-mainnet, but we've seen so much developer activity and people very ready to get involved with Monad. That's something completely different that I've never seen in a pre-mainnet ecosystem, the amount of developer activity and interest that we have.
for sure. And then you spent some time at McKinsey too, which we have a shared strategy consulting background. I
Yeah.
spent some time at
Yes.
BCG.
Yeah.
I'm sure there were
Yeah.
some things you took away from there. I know your kind of interest and passion was just always crypto because you kind of bookended your McKinsey experience with Ava Labs and now Monad. But yeah, I'm curious if you took away anything from McKinsey, even if it's just like how to think or how to write or how to present or anything like that, that you've now taken into your role at Monad.
Yeah, I think definitely how to think and how to operate. Um, if we zoom out, crypto is a very nascent industry. A lot of the people in crypto, uh, you know, it's very small circle, and we see the same people floating around, and you realize like actually most of the talent in the world, most of the way that people operate is outside of crypto altogether. I think just learning what really good operating looks like was kind of a big unlock for me coming into Monad now, like understanding what makes successful companies tick and kind of holding yourself to that standard. I think is really important. Um, and maybe it's like even though in crypto like we have our own culture, there's a lot of like unspoken professional standards. Crypto's like kind of messy in many ways, but I think like just coming in from outside and having like a set of professional standards, how you operate, how you talk to people, kind of like sets the bar a little bit higher than people are used to. And I think that's what we want here in Monad. Like hopefully everyone in the space like kind of advances that.
100%. Yeah. When you were talking about that, I was thinking along the same lines of like, you can always kind of increase the entropy in a system in terms of like, you can get messier, you can get more casual. So if you start from a place career wise of like very buttoned up, very professional, you can always, like let loose a little bit more as you move into crypto. Whereas it's hard to like learn things in the reverse way.
Yeah, it's kind of like a superpower now, like having that in your back pocket, being able to like be fluid in different environments. Like I'm sure for yourself, like you talk to on one side like capital allocators that deal with institutions all day. On the other side, you talk to like startups that are, like these founders that are working at this problem for like 6 months, degens in the trenches. And I think it's important to be able to have both sides, literally like a barbell approach that people talk to about like, you hold Bitcoin and you hold like Fartcoin. It's also like you're able to deal with institutions and then you're able to deal with, like regular normies basically.
Ecosystem function at Monad, what are the top kind of one or two KPIs or goals in 2025? Like what would be a successful year for you guys?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say that like the overall North Star is always making Monad the number one most founder friendly place to build. What that looks like in terms of goals, we really prioritize founder support. We think a lot about we are builders for builders. We want all of these startups to succeed, and that's the only way Monad will succeed. So some of the big things to think about are like making sure we have killer apps on Monad on day one. So how many apps can we get that are basically net new, only possible on Monad? That's definitely something we think about. In terms of ecosystem support, it is things like how much fundraising can we get for these companies? One thing we'd love to see is for these companies to have more, venture support within Monad than they can get anywhere else. That's one of the big North Stars and KPIs, but anything we can do to help them, we've done a lot of things, for example, like even helping place hires, for example. We have a massive community. We have a bunch of people on Twitter, Telegram, Discord. We placed a ton of community managers for different ecosystem teams and literally gotten jobs for people in our ecosystem too. So it's kind of this like flywheel that we're creating between developers and then ecosystem members. Like how do we make both the community and developers very successful is always the North Star.
100%. And if you didn't work in ecosystem at Monad, what other function or functions like would you love to try out for a day or two?
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, I really respect our growth team. I think it's a super fun job. Like they've honestly it's like a very fluid thing that they've been involved in community, but then they also run media, for example. We have a podcast called The Pipeline as well, which, we talked about this offline where I think like every crypto company needs to be involved in media in some way. It is an absolute superpower in today's day and age. If you're not using media, you're going to fall behind. And for us, like this is leverage that we can give to our founders too, that we can have people come onto the podcast, and that is like amplification. So I think our growth team has just been so smart and successful. I've learned so much from them. Yeah, that's probably the first place I'd want to go.
100%. I've seen some of the kind of montages and clip collections they've posted. That account specifically has posted, and it really humanizes the events you guys have, and makes you like want to get involved. As someone like watching on the outside, it's like, well, I want to go there next time and be in the studio or wherever
Right.
else. Almost that time here. I want to give you a chance to shout out a few ecosystem projects that are building cool things, because I'm sure you see them every day, and maybe like one or two in a couple different verticals, right? I'm sure there's some
Yeah,
agent
sure.
stuff. I'm sure there's some deepen stuff, some consumer. I know those are kind of like the areas you focus on, but yeah, would love to hear a bit more about ecosystem projects.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think a lot of our bread and butter and where we started with was in DeFi, and there's definitely a few really exciting things coming up the funnel. One team that a lot of ecosystem people know about is called Kuru. They're building fully on-chain order book powered by Monad. So I do think we like with more performance, we will see a world where order books almost become the standard, and that is going to be the best way people like that is going to be the best on-chain execution people will get. And I'm excited to see that happen on Monad. So I think we have a slew of products building in that space in DeFi. On the consumer side, we have this protocol called Kizzy that's doing prediction markets for social media betting. It's really interesting. We have another protocol called Pulse that's kind of like a combination of like consumer deepin-esque dynamics. They're doing like a wearable fitness device, creating like smarter health insights. And that's like how you onboard the consumer. But then the superpower with crypto is that you can create like data marketplaces around this. Within AI, we we spent a lot of time across like the overall crypto AI stack. It's kind of what you said when we were first chatting about agents. Like a lot of the work people have done over the past 2 years in crypto AI is like runs much deeper than just agents, right? Like you've talked about like these compute marketplaces for data, which we've seen as well. Similarly, we have sorry, we have marketplaces for inference. There's a company called 42 that they're doing decentralized inference, with the idea being that you can use these specialized small language models that can run on consumer hardware. So like it can run on someone's like MacBook Pro. And it's going to be these collections of different consumer grade hardware and specialized models working together that verify each other's output that can actually create a better model than just like one centralized massive model working in silo. And it's really interesting because like with the idea of scaling super intelligence and inference, it's very much so like how our human brain is a collection of many, many smaller models working together. And like your brain is a substrate for like basically what is a multi-model, multi-agent system. And I think we're seeing that play out. And like that's kind of the thesis, for like crypto AI and like deep in altogether. Like I think like DeepIn, obviously we talk about like physical infrastructure, but I think the power of DeepIn is that it is pure product market fit with crypto, in that what crypto's superpower is in breaking down monopolies, that it takes these centralized structures, and through crypto economics, you can basically break this down, scale up the same value, but then that surplus value goes to users. I think we're seeing that across the AI stack. So yeah, 42 is one I'm pretty excited about. There's a company called Playback Network that's basically doing like data marketplaces for training that you can use in large action models, which is where you can basically like actually have a model like do control over your laptop as opposed to just giving you language-based outputs.
It's the first I've heard of a large action model versus a large language model. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'll also check that out. Well, super cool, man. Where would you like to point people to on the internet, or what kind of like call to action would you want to put out there? Being an ecosystem at Monet, I'm sure it's something to do with founders, but yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, both for founders and communities. I think for founders, we want to talk to everyone and anyone. If you have an idea, DM anyone from the ecosystem team. We also have a website. I think we have like a page on our Monad website that's like a form for any founders if they just want to submit inbound. But honestly, at 0x3van on Twitter. We can drop in the show notes. I don't know how this
100%.
works, but drop it in the show notes and hit me up on Twitter and we can talk about it. And then if you're a community member, join the Discord, come just like talk and write about Monad, come hit us up to just to learn more. But we want everyone and anyone to be able to get involved.
100%, man. Well, thanks for coming on. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, so I'm glad we did. And
yeah, absolute pleasure. Excited, so happy we got a chance to do this, and excited to kind of keep it going and bring some more folks on soon.
100%. Sounds good. Peace.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Connor.
For
Appreciate
sure.
you, man. Take care.